boy, he needed to be spanked. I'm sorry, he needed to be spanked, and he got spanked a lot. But even my son today at age 27 would say, "Thanks, Dad, you did a good job." And by the way, the reason I have to rush out of here is because I'm going to be visiting him in court this afternoon. So what does that tell you? I don't know. Maybe all that spanking made him the aggressive person that got him into trouble. I don't know.
Discipline. Discipline can be a very controversial subject. What is the best way to discipline our children, some parents might ask? Discipline comes in many forms, and there are certainly some things one can do in order to modify behavior. Knowing your child and being connected with him and her right from the start is essential. In this way, they will know what type of behavior is expected from them and make an effort to behave this way in order to please their parents. Make sure your disciplinary techniques are right for the stage of development your child is at. A 2-year-old having a temper tantrum requires a different approach than a 10-year-old. A child's right is to be a kid. So don't expect adult behavior, otherwise that's how conflicts arise. Remember that a child's thought process is different than that of an adult. Actions come shortly after impulse. While an adult will stop to think about a consequence of an action, a child will not. Look for creative solutions to problems rather than resorting to outbursts. When conflicts arise, consider your child's needs and viewpoint. This will make it easier to resolve the situation. Provide limits and structures and establish conditions that will make it easier to follow these rules. Everyone needs boundaries. Children can't survive without them, neither can adults. Communication with your child is the key to discipline. Changing or rephrasing the same directive in a more child-friendly way may make a difference from whether your child obeys you. Learning how to talk to a child is as important as learning how to listen. Listen, and you will be listened to.
Whether you're a single parent or whether you're a typical nuclear family, is the loss of extended family. Raising a child, I mean, there's that tired old expression that it takes a community to raise a child. Well, it takes a family to raise a child. The absence of grandparents and absence of relatives add pressure onto the parent, whether it's joint parenting or whether it's single parenting, because the help that's extended by virtue of your extended family is not there. So things that traditionally 40 years ago may have been taken care of by a grandmother will now cost that single parent or that married couple an expense, because you can't drop your child off at your grandmother's. You have to drop them off at daycare, or you have to drop them off at a babysitter to become a fiscal thing. I think the other big change, or lack of change actually, is the unwillingness for us to talk about the concept of parenting and what it means. We talk about it in extremely romantic terms, which is fine, because I do think children are magical and I do think all those things. But I do know that to raise a child in Canada to the age of 18, it costs $250,000. That's the sober reality. So that we tend to think of children as something that we collect along the way, but at the same time, when we bring another life in this world, we also assume not only the emotional responsibility for that human being, but we also assume the financial responsibility. I think it's a pretty daunting factor, especially on the West Coast, for an example, for someone to choose to be a single parent and not take into account the financial burden that brings.
Be an adult. Part of being a parent is being a responsible adult. You have to be in control of your life and know how to take care of yourself. If you can't take care of yourself emotionally and financially, how can you expect to take care of someone else? Never expect a newborn baby to give you direction or to help you get your life together. A baby won't help you quit your addictions or become a better person. You have to be in control of your life first and foremost. Once you become a parent, your sole purpose in life is to take care of that child. When raising a child, it is important to demonstrate good emotional health. Your children need to know what happy, sad, and mad are, and what it is that makes them feel these ways. Also, do not lose control in front of your kids. If you lose control and are hysterical, they will not understand and will learn to act in the same way. If you are patient and are slow to anger, your children are much more likely to believe you can keep them safe.
We know nobody when we come into this world. So if you put it in that kind of context, this little 8-pound human being comes into this world and knows nobody or knows nothing. So think about it in terms of that. So whoever has the responsibility for that child, for that baby, is going to interpret the world for that child. And that interpreting the world starts with very, very basic things like comfort and warmth, and eventually into emotional safety and a personality. In particular with adolescents, I would ask you to imagine that in the last, 3 generations, there's been a third parent in the room, and that's the TV. So it's a very interesting phenomenon now with adolescent years because young people like yourself probably at 14 would know way more than I would have ever imagined knowing at 14. So what's interesting about the TV is what it teaches the 6-year-old, it teaches the 60-year-old. So you have children who are growing up being exposed to situations and sitcoms on TV that give out all kinds of messages that are not necessarily in keeping with parental or family values of that particular family. And so by the time kids reach adolescence today, they've not only got what their parents have taught or not taught them, but also what they've learned through the media. And so I think that the most important thing that I think that a parent can, I don't think it's about teaching kids. I think it's about making an awareness that once a child reaches the age of adolescence, they're on a journey of self. So adolescence is a time when 12 years, all of a sudden, that young person is going to start to come into their own. They're going to start to look at the world through their eyes and not necessarily through the eyes of their parents. One of the biggest mistakes I think that I've seen, not mistakes, but one of the biggest trip-ups is, first of all, teenagers think that by being oppositional, they're being independent. So they think by saying no to their parents, that they're being independent and they're free thinkers and they can do what they want. And parents seeing that as simple defiance, where it's the first step in a journey of actually getting independence, because the teenager is simply stating, I want to be different or I am different. I think it's key for anybody who's a parent to continue to remind themselves that that's what that's all about. And that's about finding out about who you are and what you are. And it's not going to be easy. And it wasn't easy 50 years ago, and it's not easy today.
Respect. To gain respect from others, you have to respect yourself first. There are 3 key attributes connected to respect: trustworthiness, integrity, and mindfulness. Having these qualities demonstrates your level of consciousness and maturity. To properly teach your children respect, you need to start at a young age. Studies show that children who get in the habit of speaking and acting disrespectfully have a harder time relearning new ways of relating to their parents and others, which in turn makes your job much harder.
The role of a parent in a child's life is to be a parent and to be an adult. I think what parents are responsible for is in some ways understanding the culture of teenagers. It's understanding sort of what's out there and what it is that they want their children to use as moral guidelines and values. I think we spend a lot of time today, and this is the 60-year-old in me coming out, there's a lot of time about hoping that your kids have got the Nike running shoes, than what values is your child using when they're confronted at school around issues of dope. It's about talking. It's about talking. I think that part of being a responsible adult and part of being a mindful parent, and again, I have to go back to the TV, I'm sorry, is about secrets. I think that there are certain things that children don't need to be exposed to at certain ages. So that being said, however, I also think that there is an incredible pressure on young people to participate in certain things. I think there's not a one-stop talk that's going to make you a good parent. It's about the morals and values that you're going to raise your children by. They're the currency that children need to navigate through a world, so that when confronted with a situation, say probably an easy one would be stealing. Let's just say stealing, right? You know, that the teacher in the classroom has left a $100 bill on the desk and walked out of the room and it's not there. What's going to stop that child from stealing that money is the values they've been taught. So, you know, there's a lot of talk, again, and I think it's a reflection of sort of a quick fix kind of solution to it. It's not about when your child is a teenager, it's about what you've done before your child is a teenager that will give you the currency to talk to that child while they are a teenager. I think trust is incredibly important. You know, I think trust between parents is probably the most important thing.
Guidance. Always promote your kids. Don't discourage their ideas no matter how far-fetched they are. You never know how far their interests can take them given the right guidance. Guidance is mostly about how you teach. There are two kinds of teaching. There is teaching at your kids and there is teaching to your kids. If you teach at them, your thought method is you want to prepare them for problems they will face in their life, things that are not necessarily valid in their lives at this time. This type of teaching is controlled by worry. It's all the negative thoughts of the mistakes your kids can make. Many times this advice is biased. Just because you've made those mistakes doesn't mean your kids will do the same. Talk about these problems, but do not keep coming back to them. It will only insult their intelligence and make them not want to listen all the more. If you teach to them, you give them values that they can use to prepare themselves for troubles they will encounter. Don't focus on all the small things, just address their concerns. They can face all the small things as they come up, and you'll be there to help them.
It's a misnomer, I think, at times to lead by example, but to lead by choice. You know, so is doing. Children aren't stupid, right? You know, and children, if anything, because they're in a stranger's world, they're like watching all the time. You know, so I think that choice is probably a better word than example. So that if you as an adult choose to do something, and anywhere along the continuum, you know, that your child is aware of or knows about, then you need to talk about why you made that choice. And you need to talk about the values that you live your life by. Again, I go back, you're the adult in the child's life, so you're going to temper that emotion so as to not overwhelm the child. But a child has to understand the concepts of emotion, what it means to feel sad, what it means to feel angry. I don't think a parent should ever lose control in front of a child. I think again, you go back to being a healthy parent. If you're going to lose control, then you ought to leave the room, you know, and then come back and act that out maybe in a more appropriate way.
Communication. If your child is upset, talk to them. Ask them questions about how they feel. These questions will not only let your child know you care about his or her feelings, but will also give you valuable information about what they're concerned about. When answering these questions, do not give more detail than is necessary. Remember to address your child's concerns, not yours. If they don't want to tell you at the moment, be understanding and still give them your full support. It's not that they're hiding things from you, it's that they're worried about how you would react to the things they want to tell you. Give it time and understand they will come to you with their concerns. The more open and understanding you are, then the more open and understanding they will be towards you, and the more likely you will have good communication with your kids.
Families don't sit down and eat dinner anymore. And that has been determined as probably the most important social time, because a family is a group, right? It's a group of people who live together, and it's like, you know, my saying is family, community, country. You know, so what happens here will happen here and eventually will happen here. So that period of time has been proven over centuries to be a period of time where families check in with one another. I think that food has been reduced to something that you have to do at a certain period of time during the day. King Frederick of Germany, I don't know, in the 15th century, decided that he was going to create this experiment. And he was going to take a group of kids, and he was going to have one group of kids who went over here with nurses, and they were going to be prattled with and played with and fed and bathed and kept clean and so on and so forth. So the nurses here were to look after these children. On the other hand, he took a bunch of babies and put them over here, and they were not to be touched or played with. They were simply to be looked after. All those babies died. because they found out basically human interaction was probably one of the most important things. So from the point of view of can you physically, it's incredibly important to nourish children, but if you pay more attention to diet, I sometimes I deal with friends actually whose children only eat organic foods, but they don't go outside to play. So there's always a balance kind of thing. There's always a balance, but I think nutrition definitely plays a role. I don't know if I buy about all the additives or whatever, but certainly healthy nutrition is a really important thing in terms of learning ability. That's a proven fact for sure.
Well, what advice would I give to a new parent? You know what? The bottom line is you have to learn to basically love them and accept them for who they are and what they do and how they get through life. What would I say? Just love your child, and I really believe in the principle, never go to bed angry. And I think that's a very wise way to go. Yes, you're going to get mad at your child. Yes, they're going to drive you right up the wall, but never let them go to bed with that sense that you're mad at them or that they're not loved. Always get that reconciled at the end of every day.